love dogs, so it's all perfect.
Good. I'm going to go live on Facebook. It'll take me about 2 minutes.
Sure.
And let's hold our breath. Sometimes Facebook is ornery. 90% of the time it works, but let's hope that the Facebook gods smile upon us.
Yes. Whew.
There we go. It's happening. Okay, it's going through. We're about a minute away. We are live on Facebook. Hello, Facebook friends. I'm Love Coach Scott Catamas, and welcome to another evening edition of Compassionate Talk. And we're going to have more than compassionate talk. We're going to have dynamic talk. I'm really excited to introduce you to a friend of mine. He's a friend, and he's also, to be honest, a mentor. It's always kind of strange to have a mentor that's significantly younger than myself. So, that's something I breathe through. But I have learned a lot from this man. This is Satyan Raja, and some of you may know him. He definitely has a presence in our world and Facebook and other places. And Satyan is coming to us from his home that I've been blessed to visit, beautiful home up in Langley, British Columbia. Welcome, Satyan.
Hey, Scott. Great to be here. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, I wanted to start by asking you, maybe for anybody who isn't familiar with you, just share a little bit about your background. And just yesterday when we were talking, I learned some new things about you. And I've always known you as the kind of martial arts, warrior, sage god, but you weren't always that guy. So I'd love for you to share a little bit with people about kind of your journey of life so far.
Well, it feels like I've lived many lifetimes in this one life already. And simply put, I started out in martial arts when I was a youngster. I pursued that all my life. I've continued to be in that whole world as a cornerstone, as a pillar of my personal practice. It helps me stay clean. It helps me stay focused. And from that, I've ventured and have journeyed into many forms of healing modalities, spiritual practices and cultivations and philosophies. And really, I believe that at this stage in life and what we've got going on here, there's two particular archetypes that are very close to my heart. The warrior aspect, which I believe we all have. And to me, the warrior is the one that's willing to face truth within, willing to act in spite of fears, willing to take forwarding actions that move their life and the life of society forward. So to me, the warrior is the impeccability, the one who stands in truth, and the one who has concerted actions in the marketplace of life. And there's also the yin of that. That's the yang side in the Chinese system. The yin side is the sage, learning to embrace the feminine, learning to embrace the softness, the miracle nature of this reality, the transcendent aspects of existence, the divine aspects. And so I feel this source, being sourced in the sage, our eternal perennial wisdom, connected to our actions in the world, make for a very powerful combination of spirit and action in the world. And so that's been my pursuit. I don't believe there's any arrival. I believe it's a continuous journey of joy, amazement, amusement, and continuous learning. So that's a little bit about myself.
You know, I really, first of all, it was amazing how you were able to compact it like that. And I want to acknowledge that these are unprecedented times. And as I was thinking about, having you on as a guest today, what really came to my mind was how to apply what I've observed in your life. You have, and I'm not flattering you, but Satyan has a very well-balanced life. He's got a very successful, beautiful marriage. He's got 2 kids. I've hung out with him, and he knows how to relax and have a good time. And he also works with, corporate businessmen and keeps them on track. And he's got a strong jiu-jitsu background. And so he leads a very balanced life. And it seems to me that right now our planet is calling for us to come into balance. And I'm not interested in any, why coronavirus is happening from a political or conspiracy point of view. But clearly from a spiritual perspective, spiritual not being any particular religion, but just being our own personal evolution, it seems like this is an incredible opportunity that we have to be in balance. We have to have a strong immune system or we can die. We have to honor and respect boundaries. We have to really, during this time out, change our lives in such a way where we're bringing things into more balance. As well, who better to have on my show tonight than one of the most balanced human beings that I know well. Yeah.
Well, I believe, if we take a look at the world, the challenges we have are because of a lack of balance. And many of us who are listening here, we understand the concept of the microcosm equals the macrocosm equals the microcosm equals the macrocosm. I believe that this experience is a mirror reality. So in the same way that if I'm smiling in a mirror, the mirror smiles back. If I'm frowning, I'm in balance, I'm out of internal disharmony, and the mirror will shine that back. The only difference between an actual mirror and the mirror of this life, this 3-dimensional existence, I experience it as a slow motion mirror. In the same way that if we're yodeling in the Swiss Alps, the sound comes back after a bit of delay, but comes back magnified. So to the degree we have disharmony, chaos, conflict, unresolved aspects of our being, to the degree that manifests outside in our life, and then we get to, unfortunately, we skew our life from our internal patterns, and then we see life as that. And then we reinforce it because within our mind, there's what we see. There's if you will, an observer and a prover. There's a thinker. If I feel that the world is negative, if I feel the world is this way, if I feel the world is corrupt, full of this and this, then I'm going to be seeing it around every single corner. All right? So fundamentally, in this philosophy of the warrior sage, we have an ascending line and a descending line, to keep it very simple. And by ascending line, I mean, there's some of us who are more drawn to the ephemeral, to the subtle planes, to higher dimensions, higher intuitions, downloads and streams of insight from celestial domains of consciousness and existence. And those are infinite planes of reality to access. And so those of us who are more ascending in nature, we tend to move upward and look for the higher meaning. We tend to look for the ephemeral, subtle, spiritual teachings and downloads and dimensions. The challenge with our ascending dimension, with those of us who have more of a propensity to that, is we tend to be less grounded in the world, doing things of the world, grounded in our body, taking care of finances, taking care of business, taking care of responsibilities, dealing with the nuts and bolts, taking out the garbage, fixing the roof. These things tend to be on the weaker side for those who have a disposition or a tendency towards the ascending. Now, in the same way, those who have a descending propensity, they're very strong at things of the world, making things happen in the world of form, business, work, very grounded in the body, common sense, no fluff, no woo-woo. That's the other end of the spectrum. And there's great strength and power to have in that. The weaknesses and the shadow of someone who's very strong in the descending line is they might not be open or even available to perceive intuitions, higher messages, divine insight. They might not even be open to that there is another world that is not even physical. So I believe that if we find and we honor what is our natural tendency, are we more descending, which means more grounded, more physical based, more earth based, or are we more ascending? When we recognize where we are, we can cultivate this full spectrum. And this is what I believe is the time and the era now, where we need to have our feet firmly planted on this earth plane. We need to fix up, straighten up, resolve, get dialed into where am I, where's my family, starting there, out of harmony with nature. Where are we doing things that we're not meant to do? What have we made important that's not so important? What things are we doing that is not really at this stage in our life our things to do, but someone else's thing to do? And where are the things that we need to do and should be doing and bring ourself and our fullness and our intent and our hearts to, that we can be doing and should be doing because it's our alignment now. When we have that grounded, then what happens is we become like a rooted tree, an oak. Our groundedness allows us to expand even higher into the meditative realms, the subtle realms, the cosmic realms, because I believe we're not one or the other. We are infinite beings and also mortal beings. We are mortal and immortal. We're not either or. We're simultaneously the whole spectrum. And so today's wisdom is the embrace of the whole spectrum and nurturing, solidifying, living the whole spectrum.
Beautifully stated. Beautifully stated. And it's interesting. I always enjoy hearing when someone that I respect, such as yourself, is delivering a message and basically saying similar things to what I've been saying, but with different language and different ways of putting it. For example, I often say we are spiritual beings in animal bodies, right? Which is one way to put that. And, that we're multidimensional, but right now we're having that human experience. And I really like, because I've heard you say it before, but the idea of ascending versus descending, and not a better or a worse, it's really important. Just recognizing, having compassion, because as you know, I'm all about compassion, for the challenges of being a human being. It's really challenging to be a human being. And it's also incredible, the gift of the senses. I had, as you know, Satya, and I work a lot with people that are dying. And one of the people that I helped usher out was a beautiful man named Ellis Gold. And Ellis was a very passionate man. And I was visiting him frequently, and I visited him very shortly. It was like 24 hours before he passed. And we both knew this was like his last time. And he could barely eat, but his beloved had sliced some peach for him. And he said, "Oh my God, this is when she was giving it to him, he was saying, this is the most delicious thing I've ever tasted in my life. It's so good. But you got to save half of it because I want to share the other half with Scott." and as I tell that story, I actually get tears in my eyes. And this was several years ago, because it's like two beautiful things about the human experience, even in his last hours, how delicious that peach tasted. And I want to share it with my friend who's coming to visit me, right? And that just so encapsulates the human experience for me.
Yes.
And may we fully enjoy these senses while we have them. And let's enjoy these animal bodies while we're inside of them. And be grateful. That's why if I have a religion, it's gratitude, right?
I love that. I love that, Scott. I love that. Thank you.
So we're blessed. Let's face it, you and I are healthy. We have a lot of tools that we can utilize. But I also want to acknowledge people that right now are really struggling. A lot of economic uncertainty. A lot of people have lost their jobs. They don't know how they're going to pay rent, how they're going to be able to really get by. And that's a very real human challenge. And also, as this wave hits, it hits certain areas at certain times, then the real health issue comes up. And it would appear that just about all of us are going to know somebody who we care about who's going to get sick. Most of us will probably know at least celebrities and maybe personal people that die from this. When people are in their fear around it, when they're very much in their, humanness around it, what's your message? How do you support people that are in that place, in that stage of dealing with this incredible thing?
Well, first of all, anyone who's experiencing this, my heart goes out to you. My embrace is with you. And what I have to share is myself, and many of us have gone through all types of challenges in life. In the warrior traditions, when we're faced with these type of uncertainties, these physical, real life, work, challenge, security, stability, what's going on in my whole life, the whole thing may fall apart. We can allow ourselves, first of all, in the sanctuary of our own space, to allow ourselves, first of all, to fall apart. And this is the key. There's much talk of spiritual bypassing, going a little bit too prematurely into seeking spiritual solutions, which is beautiful. We can gain solace, we can gain peace, we can gain higher perspective by allowing our spiritual dimension to become awake and aware and draw from the wisdom of these planes of reality. But in the warrior tradition, the first thing we do is we solidify our perimeter. That could be your home, could be your family. So for example, I'm here with my family. What can I do? What can you do to solidify your perimeter, to make sure that there's a strong castle around yourself? If you do not have strength in the place you're living, it might go, the landlord might evict you, who knows? Then where can you go? Start looking physically. What are the physical empowerments you need to fortify your perimeter? To do that, you have to go to the ancestor within you. You have to go to the warrior ancestors. Now here's what I want to share with everyone unequivocally. Each and every one of us has an internal, already bloomed and full warrior of spirit within us. Think about all the calamities our foremothers have gone through. All the diseases already just to be here. All the wars, all the sicknesses, world changes, devastations, starvations. How we are the end product of generations of people who have survived far worse than this. And so we already have within our genes the know-how, the capacity, the willingness, the centeredness to activate our warrior. So just know that, call upon the ancestors within our spirit, within the spirit realms. But remember, they live within ourselves. They live within our lungs. They live within our posture. They're breathing upon us. Their spirits are here to support us in and all through anything. We just have to call upon our ancient ancestors and find that warrior within and say, okay, my perimeter, I need roofing. I need good food. I need good water. What can I do to secure the foundations of life in reality? We cannot go fuzzy. We cannot go supplemental. We cannot bury our head and think that the government or others or social services or whatever will take care of ourselves. A warrior cultivates self-reliance. When Mahatma Gandhi was going from village to village in India during this time of great civil upheaval, many people in the West, they thought that he's speaking mostly about leaving England, letting the English leave. No, he was going from town to town, speaking mostly about hygiene, good sanitation, good health care, and most importantly, Be self-resourceful. That's the warrior. Now, when we can find that self-resourcefulness and say, okay, put a time limit, over the next week, what can I do? Where are the weaknesses in my self-resourcefulness? Where are there weaknesses in my castle, my perimeter? And then fortify them with sureness, with clarity, with groundedness, and just do the acts to do that dispassionately. Not from a place of fear, not from a place of all doom is going to happen, but from a place of, I am the warrior, and I will take care of my family, myself, and my perimeter. Now, having said that, having grounded in the actions that it takes, we bought food, we bought lentils, we bought lots of rice bags, just in case. If it all flies away, moves away, so what? In our animal body knows it can take care of itself. And we need to nourish and let our animal body, our 3 lower chakras of sex, power, and money, feel confident enough so that the animal body can go, when the animal body can relax, knowing that self-resourcefulness is there for a few weeks at least, then we can also with confidence, with calmness, and not spiritually bypassing, but now we can enter spirituality grounded in self-resourcefulness. Now we can seek higher meaning. Now we can seek, what is my vision and mission now? After this crisis is over, what is my yearning? What is the yearning in my soul? What is wanting to be manifest from within me now? What am I called to do? And then, as the warrior, you engage your sage and you say, and you bring the sage into life. You bring this sacrosanct spirit, this divine spirit into being, into manifestation. If you're meant to serve with greater love, then serve with greater love. Don't wait for anything. If you're meant to embrace with more fullness, then embrace with more fullness. Don't wait for permissions. Don't wait for anyone else. So it's when our spirit and our body, our warrior and our sage are fully activated, not only will we make it through this challenge, we will thrive at the end of it, and we will be a beacon, a demonstration, a transmission of wholeness, which people will start to trust more, come to us for more aid, for solace, and for clarity.
Boom. Wow. And there's just so much that you shared that is so powerful. I'm glad this is being recorded because I'm going to do a lot of watch parties. I'm going to encourage I've got 18 people in my mentorship program. I'm going to ask them all to watch this and to share it. That was very powerful. I want to riff on 2 things. First, I want to acknowledge the genius of establish and solidify your perimeter. Boom. I also want to talk about our relationship to the ancestors, because this is something that I speak of often, and I really love how you brought it up, how you shared it. First off, he mentioned it briefly, but in case anybody doesn't know, we do carry in our DNA the cellular memory of the trauma of our ancestors going back at least 7 generations. This has just been biologically proven in our lifetime, probably the last 10 years. I don't know how they figured that out. But when we're in utero, before we're even born, we get a genetic download of the trauma of our ancestors going back 7 generations. And if you kind of expand that out, that's a lot of people. And you don't know their names, and you don't know what they went through. But you know they went through everything imaginable: war, famine, rape, murder, you name it. And that's living inside of us. Now, oftentimes, when I work with people, I'll hear them even cursing their ancestors, like, oh my God, I've got this alcoholism in my family. Or it goes, my father, my grandfather, and great-grand, they were all abusers. Okay. And let's remember that our ancestors made extraordinary sacrifices with one dream: a better life for their offspring. incredible sacrifices, crossing the oceans, crossing the plains, fighting in wars, doing 3 jobs for our lives today. The extraordinary freedom. And believe me, even our great-grandfathers and grandmothers couldn't possibly imagine Whole Foods Market, right? Really, I always like to use that example. I mean, it would be absolutely impossible for them to imagine that. Or right now, that Satyan's in British Columbia and I'm in California and all of you watching are all over the world and we're all connecting with each other. We have so much freedom and we have so many tools. And it is our gift back. It is part of the cycle of life for us to give back to our ancestors and our ancestral lineage by ending the alcoholism or the domestic abuse or the low self-esteem or whatever it is. That's our gift back. That's part of the cycle because we now have the freedom and the resources and the time and the tools to work on those issues. So thank you, Satyan, for reminding us to call upon the ancestors and honor our ancestors. And one last little thing, I love to tell stories. I perform wedding ceremonies, and I love doing that, and I love helping to design the wedding ceremony. And something that I always ask, ultimately it's up to the people being married, but I say, can we call upon the ancestors? Can we call upon your ancestors? And most people are kind of like, oh, well, what would that look like? And we describe it. I want to say that, and most of the time people say, yeah, let's do it. On multiple occasions when I've been performing a wedding ceremony, when we call upon the ancestors, I've literally experienced the whole audience going, because you can feel this incredible thing happen inside the church or inside the space where we're all gathered for this sacred moment of 2 people coming into union together. So it's very real that the ancestors biologically live inside of us and spiritually, on some level, in some way, are available. So thank you for bringing that up.
I feel them here right now. And I'm going to invite everyone who's listening and watching here to invite them here to be with us, to give us the metaphysical strength that we need and the metaphysical clarity and the hand on the back. You might have the closest ancestor, they might have been an angel or a saint or a devil, who knows, okay? But some of them, of course, have their weaknesses and such, of course. But we need to call upon the whole line, right back to the starting point, to time immemorial. Our ancestors just don't go back 1, 2, 3, 5 generations. We go back to the root of life. And so our ultimate ancestor is the root of life, is Mother Gaia herself. And she is the birth and the source of all of this. Now, you mentioned something regarding the trauma that we've been carrying and that we've inherited and that's in the generations. I call this the core wound. The core wound. And we have a very unique philosophy. The Warriors' philosophy is very unique in this way. The philosophy is that this wound that we have is formed, and you know this, Scott, and many of us realize this wound that we have within ourselves, this emotional core wound, the base wound, the root of all our wounds, is because we didn't get something that we wanted enough of or more of from our family members, our parental figures. Perhaps we wanted more touch. Perhaps we wanted more acknowledgement. Perhaps we wanted to be seen as unique and not just like all the other kids. Perhaps we needed more compassionate, not judgmental love. Perhaps we needed care. Perhaps we needed just more play with our parents and they didn't give it to. The list is endless of what we didn't get enough of. And as many of us recognize, our imprints and our patterns are formed very strongly in the first few years of our life. So if we didn't get touch and affection and personal acknowledgement that we wanted as a youngster, we didn't develop the dendrites to be nourished enough to even feel that. So as we grow older, as we mature in life, Unconsciously, we seek to be filling that gaping hole that our parents never gave us. So if we didn't get nourishment in a certain way through particular types of acknowledgement, then we'll look for friends, family members, we'll look for lovers, we'll look for partners to continuously, incessantly, neurotically try to fill that core wound. We might seek religion, gurus, philosophies, Haagen-Dazs, Ram-Dass.
I actually love both Haagen-Dazs and Ram.
And so do I, right? But the idea is, what I want to get across is, in my philosophy, the core wound can never be fully healed. And it's neurotic to fully try to heal it, because it's a gaping hole. The more you try to fill in, you might have some temporary satiation, satisfaction, satiety regarding, oh, I got some love today. Everyone clapped me. Everyone said I'm a great person. But in your moment of quietude, you might feel, oh God, I'm not good enough, right? Or some challenge happens, or something doesn't go the way that you wanted, and then all of a sudden the triggers come up. So here's the warrior sage philosophy. Rather than continuously aim to heal that core wound, what if it's not meant to be filled, Scott? What if it's meant to be the source of a void and a cornucopia to feed others from, not to be filled, but to have our heart come out through that wound. So instead of trying to neurotically for the rest of your life gain acknowledgement, when I was a youngster, I wanted more personal acknowledgement. I wanted to be seen for my uniqueness. So guess what my gift turns out to be at a spiritual level? It gets to be that I get to have precise and clear seeing of what others people's core gifts and capacities are. So the very thing that you did not get enough of, I want everyone to feel, what did you not get enough of from your mother, father figures? And recognize, whatever that is, what if you were to start to give that very thing that you didn't get enough of? You reverse the polarity of seeking and you turn yourself into a transmission of the offering of what you never got. That secret formula, that switch in psychology, that spiritual gifting rather than vampirically eating energy, what it turns into, it becomes your greatest power. Your blindness becomes seeing. Your lack of wholeness becomes the key to offer wholeness to others. This is where I feel we are on this planet and this time. That this time of sacred cocooning, this time of forced austerity, gives us an opportunity to feel, what is my core wounds? What did I not get enough of that I wanted more of? And how have I been seeking this unconsciously, incessantly from friends, family, and society? And now it's my opportunity to take that and say, no, there's a gift in this. What I didn't want is mine to give now. And you know what's interesting? When you do, watch what happens. The energy shifts. The miracles will show up at your door. Trust me, miracles. So even now, if there's no one in front of you, transmit through the airwaves, through time and space, the very thing you didn't get enough of. And watch what happens. I promise you, the divine will roll out a red carpet right in front of you.
Just want us to breathe that in and really imagine it right now, whether you're watching, and most people watch the video replay. So whether you're live or watching the video replay, can you make that commitment to get in touch with what was maybe the scarcity, the wound? What was it that my heart still longs for? And can you imagine sending that out, either energetically, etherically, or finding someone in your world that you can connect with by Zoom or phone and give it to them?
Or in your household if they're there right now.
Or in your own household, exactly. Yeah. You know, as you talk, there's like about a gazillion things. Oh yes, I want to talk about that. I want to share that. So let's talk about that wound. And again, since I love to tell stories, there's an interesting thing. The best-selling poet in America for many, many years now has been Rumi, a 12th century Islamic mystic, is the best-selling poet in America for many years. Wow, what's that all about? Now, even people who love Rumi often will say, who knows the story of what happened with Rumi and his beloved Shams? And most people don't even know the story. So I'm going to briefly tell it. When Rumi was already quite successful and beloved, he met a wild man named Shams. And Shams was a drunk. He was a loudmouth. He basically got kicked out of every village that he would go to because he just pissed everybody off. He was kind of like the Jim Morrison of his time, if you know Jim Morrison's story. And but when he got to Rumi's village, he and Rumi met and they fell in love. And their love was rooted in the pathway of seeking the eternal beloved, to the mystical pathway. We don't know whether or not they were lovers physically. But what we do know is there was something about their relationship that so offended Rumi's own son, who was in his early 20s, and his closest followers, that they hired thugs to kidnap Shams, take him out to the desert, murder him, dispose of the body, and he was never seen from again. And when Rumi discovered the double horror that this man that he loved had been murdered, and that his own son and closest circle had made it happen, his heart broke into 1,000 pieces. And literally, his world was spinning around. And Rumi stood up, and he started to physically spin around and around and around. The whirling dervish tradition of Persia began with Rumi spinning. Because he was such a beloved figure. That's where that tradition actually began. And while he was spinning around and around, and his heart was broken, he made this profound choice, which is what shows up in his later poetry, which is he was going to live the rest of his life fully embracing the pathway of the broken heart. And that he realized he would never find Shams in the physical, so he would find him in the mystical. And so when he speaks of the beloved, it's a double entendre. He's referencing the eternal beloved that they both were seeking to find, as well as his own physical human beloved who had been killed. And so when Satyan was talking about the importance of it's not about when we have a wound, it's not about fixing it. It's not about taking ecstasy or psychedelics or going to see John of God to get rid of that horrible childhood wound. Now, it's wonderful to do medicine. It's wonderful to go visit John of God. It's wonderful to work with me or Satyan, but not for the purpose of perceiving there's something broken that we or they or it is going to fix. But rather, this is my wound. As Rumi writes, the wound is what lets the light in.
He took spinning, he spun in despair,
Yes.
and kept spinning until it became a path of enlightenment.
Exactly. And an incredible process. I had a wonderful chat with Satyan last night, just kind of going over, hey, what are we going to talk about today? And we brought up the Arthurian legends and kind of our mutual appreciation and what it represents. And at one point, Satyan said, it's time to call the Knights of the Round Table. And I'm going to call on, we have a few of our love coaches watching, but I'm going to call on Paul McFarlane to come on in and join us. He certainly is a modern day knight of the Round Table. Instead of a sword, he uses a guitar. And Hopefully Paul will come in. I just noticed him in the webinar room. I have not arranged for him to come in, but Paul, if you can see this, I'm sending you an invitation to come on in and join Satyan and I. Satyan, getting personal for a moment, I'm curious what might be an example in your life where you had a broken heart and how you work with that wound. While you think about which choice you want to make, I'll briefly share my wife, my beloved, who I've been in love with for so long. I was in love with her for 20 years before she'd date me. Another 5 years before she'd live with me. And then finally, after marrying her and buying this home, 6 months later, she died in the bed right behind me. And so there's that wound of her being gone, but there's also, just this morning, I had this really profound, beautiful dream about her, and I woke up and I was just like, oh God, I was with Suchi, that was her name. I was with Suchi and I heard her voice and we talked. And in the dream, she couldn't decide whether to have a child with me or to go to India. That was what was happening in the dream. So anyway, Paul will be with you in a sec, but I'd love to hear what's an example of a wound that you work with, Satyan.
This is very close to home. 2 months ago, my very close martial art teacher and coach died in a tragic hit and run accident. I was with him during that time. We were both in Hawaii. He had trained myself and my son for 5 years, 3 times a week for hours. I was more physically close to him more time with him physically doing martial arts and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu than I spend with my even wife physically. We developed a very powerful, deep, intimate bond. And it wasn't premeditated. I saw him as an invincible being. Could never imagine. He was a First Nations warrior, a deep wisdom keeper of ancient teachings. He was uncle to my son and brother to me. When we would go in our dojo, he would call me nephew because of his superior position as a teacher. When we left the dojo, it was brother. And when I was in a guiding position to support him, he would call me uncle.
Oh my God, that's so beautiful. I love that.
And I was devastated. And I just started coming out of the devastation. And then this COVID hit. I was just starting to come into a semblance of coming back into my everyday life. Because my life was close to him. He had come and traveled with me. We went everywhere together. He was security and part of my team. And I was very blessed to have him. And I see that how he prepared me over the last year. He gave me all that he could in knowledge, insight, preparation, challenge, love. And then, boom, all of a sudden he was gone. And what I allowed myself to do in the good company of my wife and my sister Caroline and my wife Suzanne, we were all together when this happened. We came close together and we allowed ourselves to melt and collapse and allowed ourselves to go deep into the heart of the devastation, deep into the heart of all the loss, all the grief. And I know now, being in my 50s, this is going to happen more and more with my loved ones. And so, in the ancient warrior sage philosophies, we understand that life has life, birth, and death. We understand this, many of us understand this intellectually. And so I'm learning now. Just now I'm starting to learn, and I'm open, and I'm getting the, if you will, the inspirations, all the memories of the great vast insight and knowledge and benevolence and care and molding he gave me and my son as a gift. So I'm grateful to say I'm in the phase of gratitude, but the loss will be permanent and forever. And I think it's valuable for us to appreciate the beauty and the power and the intensity and the delicateness, the fragility of life, by recognizing every arising moment, every arising friend, family member, everyone is going to pass. And many of us, some of us are close to our family members right now at the edge of sickness and illness, whom many of them or few of them might pass over. This is a sacred time. In India, we say death is the ultimate guru, the first guru and the last guru. And so I've had a very powerful encounter, and still I'm having a powerful encounter with the guru of all gurus.
Thank you for that. And I really appreciate, you're such a beautiful also storyteller, and I loved the example of when he was uncle, when he was nephew, when he was brother. That's beautiful. And I kind of feel that way with you too, actually.
Yes.
I'm going to keep it to men tonight. Usually we've got so many women, but in the spirit of the Knights of the Round Table, and yes, women can be knights and all of that. But you know what? Tonight I want to keep it to the guys. I want to keep it to men because that's just my inspiration. And so we have two wonderful love coaches that have joined us that are both part of Love Coach Academy. I want to welcome Paul McFarlane from near St. Louis, Midwest, and Angel, who I've known when he was living in California, but he's now in Bali. So Paul and Angel, I'd love for each of you just to share for a minute or two initially, what's something you've heard from Satyan that's inspired you or that has brought something up within you? Paul?
Satya,
Yes, brother.
I see your heart. You're good to read the phone book. You make it a story. Looking at death and inviting death, loving death, accepting death. My way, you may be familiar with the Tibetans who see every state as an in-between state, right? The Tibetan Book of the Dead, so-called, is really called the Book of Natural Liberation through understanding in the between. Everything is a between, which is really interesting. It's not like a beginning and an end. It's like another between. And I used to say you can tell a lot about a culture by how they treat death, or they make monuments, whether it's, my favorite Taoist story is the monk who was getting sick. And he finally thought, okay, so he walked to the cemetery, dug a grave and laid down inside it because he didn't want to inconvenience anybody. But that compassion, that reverence, a deep reverence, Satyan, we were telling the story about the relationship and how things have changed in the unwelcome visitor in our bodies. Really remarkable, and it touched my knowing of teachers, influencers, colleagues, comrades on the path. So really an inspiration, and it's very fitting that where you are, at what time it is right now, the way the light's coming in and lighting up the room and your physical form is stellar. Do a screen capture. You might want to use that for something.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for joining us, and definitely want to hear more from you in a little bit. Angel from Bali, what's inspired you so far in what you've heard Satyan and I talking about?
Well, good morning from Bali. Good evening over there. You can hear me? Yes?
Yeah, hear you good.
Okay, great. Morning, Satyan. Hello, Satyan. I just joined not too long ago, actually, but I was really touched just instantly by Satyan's beautiful groundedness and the truthful presence of his connection to how precious this experience has been. Though I did not hear the fullness of the context, it was very clear how powerful and meaningful and precious sharing this experience has been. And what I did connect with was the opportunity for and the wisdom in grieving. and really being with your family and honoring the memory of this precious being, and allowing yourself to really fully grieve. And for me, my connection with loss of loved ones, I lost both of my parents at different times, but in unexpected, tragic circumstances. And the teaching in that has been such a huge blessing to me, in just, there's a in the truth of, I may get it wrong, but a Rumi quote, the tears of your beloved are the greatest expression of love, the true love. So yeah, the truth tears is what I refer to this process as. It's really just such a beautiful opportunity to connect with the truth and the great depth of your love. And for me as a man, that's extremely healing, for men in particular, to allow ourselves to not have to show up as strong and, I can push through this and, we'll make the best of it. It's like, no, allow yourself to just completely fall apart. I heard you use the word devastated. And for me, that's such a powerful state to experience, is just full devastation, and to allow yourself to be devastated by the truth and the fullness of your love. Because it's from that place that allows us and invites us into the full recognition of our love, which is, again, the foundation for building from that place a deeper connection to that soul, to that spirit, and to ourselves, and to our family, and to our community. The more opportunities that we invite into our lives to connect to love and the experience of love, it may be through joyful things, but it's also through devastating things. So yeah, that's really where I'm connecting to this conversation, is the opportunity here to heal ourselves and to cultivate love through all of the fullness of human experiences. And as I think you said too, it's part of the contract of coming into an embodied experience. We come into a body, and part of our contract is, this is going to be sustained for a while, and then we pass on into something else, and that's something we call death. One of my favorite teachings, or is something, at least an inspiration that comes for me, is my invitation to death is that, yes, death is a beautiful portal into the deathless state, back into source, that's infinite, never, no beginning and no end. So for me, it's something that, we have the opportunity to cultivate a relationship to the concept of death, which is, as you said, a powerful, powerful teacher, and not to be shied away from. One, for me and the people I connect with and counsel, it's one to be invited mindfully. Yeah.
Thank you, Angel. Thank you. Earlier, we were talking about kind of our connection to ancestral lineage, and I feel kind of inspired again to kind of now go personal, like, okay, our personal journeys with all of this. So again, starting certainly with Satyan, I'm curious if you'd be willing to share something you've worked on in terms of ancestral lineage, a challenge that came down through the lineage that was palpable and real, and how you've worked with that. I think that would be an interesting thing for each of us to tackle.
Well, I come from Indian origins, from India, my family. And although the teachings of the feminine are very beautiful, they're in real application, it's a very misogynistic society. It's changing, huge advancements are being made, and there's pockets which are evolving. But misogyny, the ill treatment of women, the lack of respect, not seeing them as our equals, I grew up in that. I grew up in a society where we just didn't honor them as much. They were stuck roles. Women were supposed to be in this way, men are supposed to be that way. So that was a big imprint in my life. And it caused a lot of tension in my relationship with my wife. She comes from a Jamaican background. Right? So she's Jamaican, I'm Indian. In her family...
Angel is also from Jamaica.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool.
Okay. So in her family, the father, the men are there, make sure the woman is uplifted, they do the cooking, much more matriarchal, at least in my family, in her family. In my family, it's the women running around the men, making them all happy. And so when we married, I'm like, well, how come my wife's not bringing me food, making me feel good, making me feel like a king, all of those things. And so there was a lot of conflict when I was younger, because we've been together now 33 years. And so that was something very powerful I had to work through. And I was very blessed that I got into healing therapies when I was young. I grew up in a very intense, again, very male-dominated martial art world. But then I got into shiatsu therapy and acupuncture. And this was when I was 18. And then what started happening was I had this one lady who came in for a session. At that time, it was mostly women. 80%, 90% women came for shiatsu, body work type therapy. And then there was this pregnant woman who came. And I worked with her and she was so happy. She felt so much better. She started referring more pregnant women. And then I became a pregnancy specialist at around 19 years old, 20 years old. So in the daytime, I had to learn how to be with the feminine in an honoring, loving, embracing, caring, intuitive, compassionate way. Not you owe me or you should be doing this, but quite the opposite. I had to rescind and lower and let go of my ego and put it underneath and then lift them up. I had to defer my ego. And in the evening, I was training and learning martial arts. So it was this very interesting contrast that I was living. And I believe that the gift of being able to serve women, not sexually, not just trying to get something, not trying to see them from fixated roles of the past. It was a journey for me. Even though I got it here, in practical application, I had to learn how to shift how I speak to my daughter, how I speak to my wife, how I speak to my mother. And so I have to say that also my mentor, Benito, who's a First Nations mentor, my mentor who passed away, he also came from a very matriarchal lineage, being the absolute stalwart warrior, solid spine. But you know what? When his mother says anything, he jumps. She says jump, he says how high. And he was the most noble, intense warrior. So I learned from him. If a man with such manliness can defer his ego and be of service to the great feminine, then my goodness, so must I at least try. And he showed me that. And so I believe we're in the era where we can express these things to men, to youngsters, to other fellows. But when we aim to live it, the younger men, the men around us, will absorb and rise up through our demonstration and also our intolerance of what was demeaning diminishment of women. And when we embrace and we say, now I will no longer tolerate that and have that in ourselves, and this is sacred intolerance, not unconscious intolerance. It's this sacred, divine intolerance that I'm not going to allow that to happen to my mother, my daughter. I'm not going to allow in my space for other people to dishevel or to diminish the honor and the integrity of women. So I believe this is where we are now as men. We need to cultivate strong spines of integrity, of strength, of honor, of chivalry, the old school masculine virtues, if you will. And at the same time, we have to learn to open our hearts, our embrace, our love of others, our care, our protection of others as well.
Sacred intolerance. That's a beautiful one that I want to pop that into my head. I've gotten some good ones from you tonight. Thank you. It's always so powerful to hear a person's personal journey, and I really appreciate, because I did not go over questions with Satyan before. Paul and Angel know this. I just throw people in there and then ask them like the most, that's just kind of my style. So thank you for your, going deep and vulnerable. I was kind of thinking about which example I want to use from my family, and really it's the sadness that my parents were very unhappy in their marriage. They gave all their love to me, the child, but they were very unhappy and got divorced when I was 10 because my dad he believed the child shouldn't be subjected to divorce until they were 10. And when my sister was 9, Mom got pregnant with me and he stuck around another 10 years. I was very unhappy during all that time. And then there were affairs and on my dad's side and my mother, and I was very pained. And what I know about my grandparents, lots of divorces, lots of unhappy marriages. In fact, I'm not aware of a single happy marriage in the ancestral lineage as I know it. And so what am I doing for a living? Trying to help people find a way to have happiness and harmony in their sacred marriages, in their relationships. So that's kind of how it shows up for me. Yeah. Paul and then Angel. It's something in your ancestral lineage that you're aware of, that you're doing your part, your piece to honor, manage, heal.
What is my part? What is my piece? Well, the pendulum, right? So if men are running everything and starting wars and treating women like crap, well, how do we fix it? Oh, which is it? Well, over time it settles. And those of us who are already here are offended. It goes either way. It's like, no, you see, it's not about, I don't like you because you're a woman. I don't hate you because you're a woman. It has nothing to do with it, right? Well, in my life, I have never, ever, ever, ever had any sort of a feeling of using a woman's body for my pleasure, domineering a woman, never. And as I've grown older, I've figured out 2 reasons, probably why. My most recent past life, I was a woman in the north of India. I spent all my time outdoors. I was pyramidal in shape. I sat under a big banyan tree. There were animals and dogs and cats and birds and squirrels and kids everywhere. So that's my thing I'm missing in this life, because I remember it too keenly. And then also practically in this life, my very first friend was a girl. And that set me off on the road of seeing women as equal playmates and whatnot. And in my upbringing, my role models, Scott knows this, but everyone else does. My mom, still alive, very intense, Sicilian, angry, stressed, powerful, brutal, and my dad kind of shiftless and disappearing in a way. So this can be kind of confusing to a boy growing up, and you realize you don't want to be like your dad. And, what we are obsessed with would become, so I'm always on guard if I'm becoming anything that I didn't like about him. But now, right to here, what's been so great about meeting virtually Scott and some of the other great men in this group, and Nayu said that, which is feel wonderful. I'll have to talk martial arts one of these days. I practice Tai Chi Chuan, which is from India and then China. But it's so great to find a way that is divine respectful. In other words, we recognize our divine masculine and we respect and honor and love the divine feminine, which is why the number 11 is my favorite number. It's the masculine divine 5 and the divine 6 put together. It's the K letter of the alphabet, magic spelled the old way. It's that idea that when the best of man and woman come together, anything's possible. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very, very much, brother. Angel, What comes up for you? And I love the Jamaica connection, by the way. That's kind of a cool thing. Angel, you're muted. I am muted.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's an interesting question. Honestly, in terms of my known familial history, it doesn't go back very far. On my father's side, I met my grandparents maybe once or twice when I was a child. But, I've come to learn a lot of the family history, and also obviously to kind of learn, what makes a Benjamin. Benjamin's my family name. What are the values that supports, the being a Benjamin. And those have been very informative. And then also, observation of my father and my uncles and aunts on his side of the family. They come from a very Catholic, very, very strong Catholic background in the Caribbean. The small island of Dominica is where my father's from. And my grandfather was a school principal, the main school principal at the main school in their area. And half of my, uncles and aunts are something in the church, either a nun or a priest and so on. So very strong Catholic upbringing. My dad kind of almost went that way, but didn't in the end, and became a doctor, medical doctor. But some of the character traits that came through that ancestral side of my lineage have been challenging for me. One, the formality of religion, which for whatever reason my dad didn't impose on us as kids. But what was very clear was strong masculinity, this very strong, decisive, I'm the one that makes the decisions. I am very at liberty with my sexual expression, my demand or need for sexuality and sex, for intimacy. Very powerful tradition, very common in the Caribbean is, whether you're married or not, you may have many female partners, we call them baby mothers. In the Caribbean and Jamaica, you have a child with somebody outside of your marriage. And it's very common, very accepted in Jamaica in particular, but also throughout the Caribbean. I think it's part of perhaps the African heritage traditions that came across with slavery, with which most of the Caribbean are ancestors of, relatives of. So there's this broad acceptance of full sexual expression, desire, and what that leads to in terms of infidelity very openly. When I got married, I married an American, and I had my wedding in the U.S. I went back to Jamaica to kind of have a reception, I suppose, there. And right at the reception, bringing my American wife with me back to Jamaica, after the formalities of a reception dinner, my dad circled me with his friends, and they all said right in front of my wife, "Oh, Nigel, now that you have an American wife, now we have to find you a nice Jamaican brown gal." So right in front of her, right, fully there. Now we have to find you a nice brown girl. And so I was horrified. She was horrified, but she took it very well. So these, without going into much longer story, I grew up in a household that was a lot of violence, a lot of domestic violence, a lot of instability, and my father was a very unstable, angry man. And I did the holy vow, like I've heard some of you have done at a certain age of childhood, that I'm never going to be like my father. And that's really shaped a lot of who I have become for much of my life until maybe my 40s. I'm 56 now. Where really I took the opportunity to look at, well, who am I really? Am I my conditioning from my parents, or who do I choose to be? And I recognize that in a way, threw out the baby with the bathwater when I cut off my relationship with my father, and that ancestral connection to the men in my family who had a strong sexuality, who had a strong need for self-expression, freedom, being the decision maker. And I was quite the opposite of that. I was unsexually expressed, not a high priority for me much of my life. Always basically gave away my needs, always in service to the feminine, service to my wife, my family, to other people, very loose boundaries. And so, yeah, absolutely, in a way, I recognized that I was not a safe person or the person that I wished to be because I was not embodying some of the masculine heritage that my father and masculine ancestry had actually offered me and gifted me. I'd thrown it all out and become much more comfortable in my feminine as a child and as a man because of my fear of the power of a misuse of the masculine authority and capacities. And so this has been my healing the last 15 years, has been focusing on my inner marriage and rebalancing my masculine with my feminine and integrating that and helping others, helping men, which is what I do now, men's circle work and love coach counseling, helping men really tune into the fullness of their emotional intelligence. So I love that, these ancestral woundings can really create opportunity for us to come, as Paul said, also to come back into balance, to do that monitoring, self-awareness and monitoring of which way do I want to swing, and really moving and doing the dance of life to come back into a place of balance. So it's a beautiful opportunity, and I'm grateful for the imbalance that came before me. That my life, it gives me the opportunity to witness and to be mindful of and to choose how do I wish to show up and not be just the result of my ancestry.
Thank you, Angel, for sharing that. Thank you. We're going to wrap up soon. I've invited my good friend Krishna to join us, and Krishna is actually in Brisbane, Australia. And he's also like Satyan and Krishna, someone I have multiple relationships with. But I thought it was perfect. I saw that he was one of the people watching. And so I invited him to join us because I believe that Krishna also is a really powerful example of, again, a very strong tradition, ancestral, and he lives a very different life than his ancestors. So again, Krishna, just a little bit about your challenges with that and maybe some of the ways that you are still honoring your ancestral lineage, but transforming it in this new way. And then we'll give Satyan a chance to give us some closing thoughts, and we'll be concluded by 7:30. Krishna, you're up. Oh, and you're muted.
Let me unmute myself. Thank you, Scott, and pleasure to meet you all, and honored to be on this panel with you. Satyan, my mother's surname was Raja, so I suspect we're related at some level.
That's okay. Wonderful. Wonderful.
My cultural heritage is Indian. So my grandparents left India around 100 years ago, and they moved to Africa. And then in the 60s, they moved to England, and in the 70s, we moved to Australia. So I have a lot of different cultural influences going on. And in some ways, my household culture was locked into India 100 years ago when they left. And I've been on my own journey of self-development for 25 years now. I have peeled away layer after layer after layer, and I felt, as I approached the 25-year mark, that's when my core wounds really, really came to the surface. Everything before then just feels like dusting. And, I can make changes and then I do the work, but there's more layers. Anyway, 25 years in, yes, there are still more layers, but I'm seeing the real ancestral wounds, the real things that have shaped my life blueprint from when I was a young child. Deep layers and deep feelings of shame, deep feelings of unworthiness. Culturally, I come from an Indian background where there's a class system. There they call it caste, but now I live in Australia. There's very much a class system. Well, when I say there is, Australia is very middle class. However, my mindset was still around achieve, achieve, achieve. I studied law. I became a successful businessman. Do, work, 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 work. Why? Because that was just inbred into who I was culturally. And I don't believe it's genetic. I believe it's cultural conditioning in my case. Cultural belief systems now I'm better able to let go of. A life wound as a young child of I'm not worthy enough or I'm not good enough. Now, 40-something years later,
I'm in an interview.
Okay, let's just acknowledge that.
Almost done.
What it is. And maybe I don't have to worry about what people think of me. Maybe I don't have to spend my life making other people happy. And when I say making other people happy, my immediate family, my intimate partners, and in business, gosh, the purpose of business is to serve. All right, it's exhausting, it's tiring. A lot of that stuff has cultural roots in it. And I'm not saying any of these are bad traits. But I'm now really learning about boundaries. So it's not my responsibility to make my intimate partner happy. They can do that all by themselves. Of course, what I do has an impact on them. And the same applies with my clients. The same applies everywhere in my life. I have to drop in, not from my head, not from my fears, but actually in an embodied way, dropping in through my heart into my body, letting intuition speak to me, or let divinity speak to me through my intuition and make my decisions from there. And in terms of where I'm at, in terms of letting go of the ancestral stuff, less here, more here, and more so from divinity channeling to and through my body. Boundaries, self-sourcing. It's interesting. Last night I had a real tear of gratitude. I'm someone who's grown up with a lot of resilience. I learned to work hard. I've learned to develop my mind. I've learned to develop. I do more personal growth than anyone I know. I've been doing a lot. And I said, real tear of gratitude because, maybe it's propaganda, maybe it's not, but I'm reading in the newspaper, I'm hearing my prime ministers say certain things about what's going on in Australia right now, and I'm like, okay, you know what? Maybe they've really looked after us. Maybe they've shut down the country. Maybe they've stopped the spread of all these diseases and viruses, and maybe we're going to be okay. And it was just a real tear of gratitude of, I don't have to lock myself in my farm. I've got 15 acres and I've locked the front gates and maybe I don't need to buy a shotgun and just lock myself away for the next 5 years. Maybe it is going to be okay. And maybe this will resolve. Maybe this too shall pass. Mm-hmm. And there's a difference between actually being able to trust someone from outside to deliver and having to take it all on, saying, I'm resilient. I will get through.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, Krishna. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love your voice. Doesn't have the most beautiful, beautiful voice.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I want to thank you. And for me, it's just really cool. And I'm getting a lot of people saying, oh my God, these 5 powerful men. So it is cool. So thank you, Satyan, for the inspiration to call upon the new Knights of the Round Table, where we all come together to share our wisdom and our light. And we're all learning and growing. I'm going to turn it over to you, Satyan, for any final thoughts you'd like to share.
Pointing to what you just shared, we're in a very powerful time, I feel, where men and women, in this occasion, I had a beautiful time to meet these new brothers and to bond and to hear their story and their hearts. Since we've done this now, let's continue, is my invitation and my heart's calling and desire to continue this bonding wherever we are around the world. To be able to be men of integrity and nobility, strong in the spine, in impeccable character and essence, and at the same time absolutely vulnerable. So invincible in one level and then totally vulnerable at another level. And I believe this is our evolution. And this is where we're moving to. And this spectrum of our beings, a strong spine and an open heart, is what's being called upon us to create a new reality in this time that'll come out of this challenging time. And the bonds we're making right now, we can continue to foster. We can continue to make allies, allegiances, and then create a beautiful destiny in our personal lives and for society. It's time right now.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Who knows, maybe we'll start an online men's group, and just keep bringing in the brothers. I think that would be a very beautiful thing. If people want to see more of Satyan, how do people reach you, Satyan? What's the best way?
My website is warriorsage.com, and there's a gift of 3 complimentary trainings, workshops that we've done. One is on relationship. It's called the Relationship Activation. There's an Abundance Activation. There's Power Activation. So I invite everyone to download those for free and do some training on your own at home while we're in this lockdown space and really upgrade those essences.
Beautiful, thank you. And Satyan is also going to be one of our guests. As many of you know, I've got a wonderful program called Saturday Night Live with Global Peace Tribe. It's every Saturday night at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. And this Saturday night, Satyan's going to be one of our speakers. We also have John Gray, the author of Men from Mars, Women from Venus. It's some incredible, beautiful music. Star Matthias, Joy Levi, a wonderful gal, Lizzie Tremaine. My friend Maria Stark is going to be presenting. And it's going to be a really beautiful weaving of music, inspiration, wisdom, and most of all, global community. Last Saturday night, which was only our 3rd one, we had several thousand people watching. And we think we're going to, this week, we're going to pass the 10,000 people mark. But then at the very end, some of the people in our webinar room, we invite that they come in and there's a community connection. So join us. And of course, last thing here in Love Coach Academy, every morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, we've got Compassionate Talk. Quite frequently, Paul has joined us for that, and Angel. And the last one is this Friday morning, I'm going to be doing a Compassionate Talk with Emily Orm, whom most of you know. And Satyan certainly knows. Emily went up and attended one of his 3-day workshops a few years ago and really loved it. So there you have it. Lots going on. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And if you came in late, go back to the beginning because there's some incredible wisdom that Satyan shares that's really powerful. Good night, everybody. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you, brother. Much love.